Obviously, it's a difficult time for Am Yisrael, but Be'ezras Hashem, as I mentioned last night, in the zechus of your Torah learning and the Torah learning of Baruch Hashem, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of B'nai Torah in Eretz Yisrael who are starting a little early. It should be a great zechus for Achenu, Achiyosenu, B'nai Yisrael that are going through very, very difficult times. And we hope that the tide will turn. Again, I don't want to repeat my whole talk. I mean, in a way, as I say, it's both frightening and exhilarating in the sense that there are many, many indications that this may be connected to the wars of Gog and Magog. So the good news is that is the precursor to Mashiach. The bad news is that it's kind of a bad time, meaning it's a very, very difficult time. It's the Chavlei Mashiach. Now, what's interesting is that the Vilna Gaon himself writes, there's a very interesting sefer, not written by the Vilna Gaon. It was written by a Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, Rav Hillel of Shklov. And it's called Kol HaTor. Tor is with a tuf. That means the sound or the singing of the turtle dove. It's a phrase in Shir HaShirim, Kol HaTor Nishma B'Artzenu. And Rav Hillel of Shklov essentially recounts the Vilna Gaon's teachings on the coming of Mashiach and the building up of Eretz Yisrael. And there are actually many, many interesting things in Kol HaTorah. A lot of it is Kabbalistic, a little difficult to understand. One interesting thing that he says, I'll tell you one little thing. He makes the point that the Vilna Gaon, the Vilna Gaon didn't say this, the Talmidim said it about the Vilna Gaon, this part, that the Vilna Gaon was a Gilgal, a reincarnation of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that is why he was not able to enter Eretz Yisrael, because as you know, the Vilna Gaon actually left Vilna to go to Eretz Yisrael. And in fact, he wrote a famous letter to his family. Many Sidurim have two letters. Sometimes there's the Igeres HaRamban, the letter of Ramban, when he went to Eretz Yisrael, and of course he actually got here, and Igeres HaGra, the letter of the Vilna Gaon to his family when he left to go to Eretz Yisrael. Right? You can see maybe if you have, it's not in the article Siddur, but if you have Sidurim that have extra things, so they'll often be Igeres HaGra there. Very interesting letter in a lot of ways. He tells the women of the home not to go to shul because women are into fashions, whatever. He says it's better to daven at home, whatever. But what's interesting is with the Vilna Gaon is that he never made it. He never made it. A few months after he left, he came back to Vilna. He offered no explanation to anybody why he came back. And to this very day, there is a lot of discussion exactly why the Vilna Gaon did not come to Eretz Yisrael. Some give very prosaic reasons that I frankly find difficult to believe. Because the Gra could figure it out, if anybody, that the Gra held that there was so much difficulty in how he would fulfill Truma and Meiser and Shemitah that he literally felt he had no way of properly doing it, and somehow, he left, but somehow in the course of his trip he came to that conclusion. I always thought that's a very, very weak reason, because if anybody in the universe could figure out halachically how to do things, it would have been him, but nevertheless, some give that as the reason. Others give a more mystical reason, which actually I think makes sense, that the Vilna Gaon had a plan to come to Eretz Yisrael and bring Mashiach. There would have been a Geula. And he determined, al pi Kabbalah, that this was not the right time, and therefore he needed to go back. The Talmidim said that because he was a Gilgal of Moshe Rabbeinu, just as Moshe Rabbeinu, so Moshe Rabbeinu can't escape the Gezerah even if he gets reincarnated. And as Hashem decreed that Moshe Rabbeinu cannot come to Eretz Yisrael, so even when he's reincarnated, he will not be able to come. That was the Messiah among the Talmidim, that the Vilna Gaon was a Gilgal of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's interesting that there was a professor at Hebrew University, he was a from person, he wrote a very interesting book in which he points out, again I'm digressing here, but I think it's an interesting digression, he points out that the route the Vilna Gaon took to get to Eretz Yisrael until he turned back was a very circuitous route, a very, very bizarre route. He made a pit stop, or he made a stop in Amsterdam. Now, if you look at the map and you're going from Vilna, from Lithuania, to Eretz Yisrael, you would go by the Black Sea or whatever it would be. You would not necessarily go further inland to Amsterdam. Like, why did he make a stop in Amsterdam? It's a bit of a mystery. What was he doing in Amsterdam? So the theory that was posited, again, these are theories, we don't have any rayas for this one way or the other, is that Amsterdam was the place where the Ramchal had lived. The Ramchal died shortly before this. And, today the Ramchal, everyone is makabel the Ramchal as, great and authoritative, but one has to know that in the Ramchal's lifetime, he was he died very young. He died at 40 in Eretz Yisrael. But he was very, very controversial. Because remember, he was shortly after Shabtai Tzvi, and the Ramchal was teaching Kabbalah, and the Ramchal was almost going to author a new Zohar. People were scared of him. I mean, Rabbanim were scared of him. They thought that he was creating a quasi-messianic movement, and as a result, the Ramchal was ordered to stop teaching Kabbalah. He was threatened with excommunication. Of course, in a way, Hashem has a sense of humor. The three svarim that are most learned of the Ramchal are Mesilas Yesharim, which is considered to be the greatest of the Musar svarim, Derech Hashem, which is a systematic study of Jewish philosophy, and Das Tvunos, which is more esoteric, but Das Tvunos is about divine providence and free will. It really is kind of the mechanism by which God interacts with the world. Essentially, Derech Hashem talks about it too, but Das Tvunos is a book length of what is like one chapter in Derech Hashem. Now, it's interesting that all of these three books were written only because the Ramchal was not allowed to write about Kabbalah, because all his he has many, many svarim on Kabbalah, most of which are beyond us, most of which we don't even learn. So the three svarim that Klal Yisrael learns most from the Ramchal came as a result of his not being allowed to write or teach Kabbalah. But the joke is, I shouldn't call it a joke, is that all of those three Sfarim are very much based on Kabbalah. Even Mesilas Yesharim, which people think is a straight, Musar book, is filled with Kabbalistic ideas. So the Ramchal had a very great talent. He was able to explain Kabbalah in non-Kabbalistic terms. So he snuck it under the table, so to speak. In fact, there are even editions of Mesilas Yesharim that try to show how it correlates with the teachings of the Arizal. But again, in Mesilas Yesharim, you certainly see no Kabbalistic vocabulary. There's no reference to Sfiros. There's no reference to anything at all. Now, Derech Hashem Das Tvunos gets closer and closer and closer to Kabbalah. There's no question about it. But he doesn't cross the line. So in a sense, Klal Yisrael, talk about Hashem turning something dark into light. Hashem took the Ramchal's being disabled from teaching Kabbalah, and that became a great vehicle by which he disseminated Kabbalistic teachings in non-Kabbalistic arguments. But going back, so going back to the Gra, I'm digressing on digressions on digressions, I have to remember where I'm going. Here's the idea. The Ramchal was very, very controversial. But the Gra had a tremendous admiration for the Ramchal, although they never met. And the Gra said if the Ramchal would have been alive, he would have walked. The Gra said, I would have walked from Vilna barefoot to Amsterdam to meet the Ramchal. It is said that when the Ramchal was prohibited from teaching Kabbalah, he had thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of Kabbalistic writings, many of which he burnt and some of which he concealed. The Gra was aware of a hidden group of writings in Amsterdam. And as part of the Messianic idea, he wanted to go to Amsterdam first to find the Ramchal's writings that he would then bring to Eretz Yisrael. And al yidei kach bring the Mashiach. Now, beyond that, we don't know much. We know that he did get to Amsterdam. That much we know. Did he find the Ramchal's writings? That we don't know. Did he have the Ramchal's writings? Maybe yes, maybe no. Did he decide not to go to Eretz Yisrael because he couldn't find the Ramchal's writings, or fakert? He found the writings and he determined based on those writings it wasn't the right time to go. We don't know. A lot of things are mysterious. But nevertheless, the Gra himself wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, and the Talmidim of the Gra did come. Much of what is called, much of what is called the Yishuv Hayashan, the old pre-Zionist religious community, are the Talmidim of the Vilna Gaon. They built, and not only did they create a spiritual infrastructure, but they created a physical. I mean, they were involved in the building. In fact, they had a sheet, like Meah Sharim, these neighborhoods, they actually had a shita that it was very important that even the physical infrastructure of Eretz Yisrael be built with Kedusha and Tahara. You wouldn't use Arabs, you wouldn't use non-religious Jews. Everything had to be Kedusha. The heating systems, the bricks, the pipes, everything and the like. So many of these great Talmidei Chachamim were physical workers in terms of digging ditches and bricklaying, being carpenters, and everything else. So the Gra had, and indeed that is exactly why, at least the official Ashkenazi Minhagim of Yerushalayim are the Minhagim of the Gra. Right? You may ask, like, why the Gra? Because the Talmidim of the Gra were the foundation. It's different up north. It's very, very different. Up north, talking about Tzfat, Tiberia, the primary Jewish Ashkenazi, Sfardim, I'm not talking Sfardim, were here before, and they had a different Messiah. In fact, Ravaji Yosef made the argument, although nobody listens to it, and even he didn't push it, that Ashkenazim have no right to even be Ashkenazi in Eretz Yisrael, because when they came as a small minority among Sephardic Jews, that they were majority. They were mechuyev to adapt to the majority of the Kehila, and the fact that kama batal, each Ashkenazi becomes nullified in a majority of Sephardim. So even when you get a number of more Ashkenazim than Sephardim, they still have to be Sephardim because they got nullified in the majority as they came. So he says, Ashkenazim have no right to exist in Eretz Yisrael as Ashkenazim, but he was masking that maybe it's too late to change that at this day. So I'm not talking about Sephardim, but in terms of the Garin, in terms of the root of the Ashkenazi Yishuv, so in Yerushalayim it was the Talmidim of the Gra, and in Tzfat and Tiberia it was the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, Chasidus, right? So Chasidus got established up north, and that became the fundamental minhagim, sans, and other types of Chasidus. And in Yerushalayim, minhagi, now obviously over the years, everything gets mixed up. So obviously you have Litvisha people up north, and you have Hasidim down here. But originally, the foundational minhagim of the Kehilas were essentially Chasidish and minhagim, of course different types of Chasidus, up north. That's why, for example, duchening, right? Just to give you one example. Obviously, we duchen when there's a Kohen. We have Birkat Kohanim every day. Now, you know that in Chutz La'aretz, if you remember, at least among Ashkenazim, we only have Birkat Kohanim on Yom Tov, right? Musaf of Yom Tov. We don't have Birkat Kohanim any other time. Now, why that's so is indeed a very, very big problem. The Ramah himself identifies the minhag, that our minhag is only to duchen on Yom Tov. But why? The Torah says there's a mitzvah for Kohanim to bless people. The Torah does not say it's only on Yom Tov. Like, why? So the Ramah has to come up with a reason that is pretty dochak, a pretty forced reason. Again, the Ramah didn't invent this minhag. The Ramah is trying to explain an existing minhag that predated him. We don't know exactly how old that was. And the Ramah says, well, a Kohen is supposed to duchen only if he's besimcha, only if he is in joy. And the problem is that in Chutz La'aretz, nobody is happy except on Yom Tov. Even on Shabbos, you're not really happy. Yom Tov, you're happy. So you can only duchen on Yom Tov because that's when the Kohen is besimcha. Mashen Kain in Eretz Yisrael, we're always besimcha. And the like. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is a very, very weak reason, because this is so subjective. I mean, some people are sour even on Yom Tov, right? You could have a Kohen who's not particularly happy on Yom Tov, and some people are happy even during the week. I mean, to make a rule, we're not going to do a mitzvah d'oraisa, because we're making the assumption that unless it's Yom Tov, you're not happy, is a very, very shvach reason. So the emes says, because of this, the Gra had the opinion, the Vilna Gaon had the opinion, that Ashkenazim should duchen even during the week, just like Sephardim, every single day, even in Chutz La'aretz. Now, the Gra's position in Vilna was a very interesting position. If you were to ask, what was his position in the great Jewish Kehillah of Vilna? Vilna was one of the great, even before the Vilna Gaon, Vilna was one of the great, great, great cities in Klal Yisrael. There were many Gedolim before the Vilna Gaon in Vilna. So what was the Vilna Gaon? Was the Vilna Gaon the Rav of Vilna? No, he was not. Was the Vilna Gaon the head of the Beis Din of Vilna? No, he was not. The Vilna Gaon had no position at all in Vilna. The Vilna Gaon, everyone acknowledged his unbelievable greatness, but the Vilna Gaon was a private citizen who had no official role in the Kehillah of Vilna. Now, the truth of the matter is, to a large degree, that's exactly what he wanted. He didn't want to be involved in running a city. He wanted to learn and teach Talmidim, but he was a private citizen. As a result, Vilna had rules. There was a big shul in Vilna, but if you wanted to open up your own minyan, you needed permission of the Kehillah. You couldn't just open up your own minyan. So because the Vilna Gaon had unusual minhagim that were not mainstream, he wanted to have his own minyan. He had his own minyan, but he had to have reshus. He had to ask permission from the kahal to be able to have his own minyan, and this was called the Vilna Gaon's klois. Klois means like the house. And it's very near the main shul. The main shul of Vilna was a big, magnificent shul, and it was in a courtyard that had a lot of different buildings, and one of the smaller buildings in the courtyard was called the klois of the Gaon, the Vilna Gaon's klois. These buildings survived until the Holocaust. The Holocaust, they were destroyed. 100 years ago, there were people who were davening in the Vilna Gaon's klois, as well as the main shul of Vilna. Now, what that means is, though, that the Vilna Gaon's minhagim were not the minhagim of the Kehillah of Vilna. You would think the Vilna Gaon would establish the minhagim of the city. Not at all. The city followed Ashkenazic minhagim, and if the Gra's minhagim were different, then he was given permission to do his own thing in his place. But that was not those were not the minhagim of the city as a whole. Right? It was understood that the Vilna Gaon was different, and he had the authority to deviate, but that did not become the authority for the Kehillah. It's actually very, very, very interesting. So one of the things that the Gra wanted to do in his klois was to institute Birkat Kohanim every day. But the Messiah is that every time he tried to do it, a fire broke out in the building, as if Hashem is saying, don't change the minhagim. So the question you'll ask me is, so why do we duchen every day in Eretz Yisrael? The answer is, Ashkenazim duchen every day, at least in Yerushalayim, because since they were Talmidim of the Gra, they took the Gra's minhag and they brought it to Eretz Yisrael. And the reason why, b'derech klal, they don't duchen every day in Sfat and Tiberia is because the Garin, the foundation of that Kehillah, were Hasidim, and Hasidim never had the Hanhaga of the Gra to try to duchen every day. In fact, we actually have a problem in our Sameach, a little bit of a problem. When we have a Jayali Shabbaton or whatever, even a Beis Medrash Shabbaton or a center, if you go up to Tzfat or Tiberia, and you're going to spend Shabbos there, or even during the week, do you duchen? Right? It's your minhag to duchen, but on the other hand, you're in a place where they don't duchen every day. Right? So sometimes we're inconsistent. Some years I know we did it because it was our minyan, and our minyan, we do our minhagim no matter what. But technically speaking, when you're in the makom where that's not the minhag, you don't do it. And the minhag in Sfat and in Tiberia, which is a very unusual minhag, it's a question of what the makor is. They don't duchen during the day, but they duchen on Shabbos Musaf. Now, if you think about that, l'chayre, there is no makor at all in halacha for duchening on Shabbos Musaf. The two minhagim that we have is you either duchen only on the Musaf of Yom Tov, or you duchen every day. There is no shita in halacha that says duchen on Shabbos only during Musaf. that's kind of an in-between minhag between duchening every day, which is the minhag of the Gra and Sfardim, versus only duchening on Musaf of Yom Tov, which is Ramah. Again, Ramah didn't create the minhag, but Ramah identifies that minhag. But the minhag among the Hasidim in Tzfat and Tiberia is to duchen Shabbos Musaf. So if you're interested in historically tracing minhagim, this might be an area that you might want to try to investigate and see what the reason is. By the way, as another aside, again, I apologize for the digressions, but I'll try to remember what my main point was, is that when I was growing up, I grew up in Connecticut, and I went to a Young Israel synagogue, and I distinctly remember, and maybe you remember this too, that we never duchened on Shabbat, right? We only duchened on Musaf of Yom Tov, okay? But when Yom Tov was on Shabbos, let's say like this year, Sukkot or Shmini Atzeres, we didn't duchen on Shabbos, even though it was Yom Tov. And I distinctly remember that particular custom. Now the question is, the Mishnah Berurah actually writes that some people have a minhag not to duchen on Yom Tov, which is Shabbos, but the Mishnah Berurah says explicitly that is a mistake. And the mistake is based on the fact that the minhag of Ashkenazim, based on the Ramah, is we don't duchen on Shabbos. But that just means you don't duchen on Shabbos. But it never meant to say you don't duchen on Shabbos when it's Yom Tov. In other words, Kehilos made a mistake. They took the instruction of not duchening on Shabbos to mean you don't duchen on Shabbos even when it's Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that is legamri a mistake, because the statement you don't duchen on Shabbos just meant that which the Ramah says you duchen on Yom Tov does not include Shabbos per se, because Shabbos were still not besimcha. So l'chayra, therefore, most poskim actually say it is a minhag b'ta'ut, even in Chutz La'aretz, not to duchen on Shabbos, which is Yom Tov. The only thing is, you don't say the Ribbono Shalom, you don't say the petitionary prayers for dreams and the like on Shabbos. On the other hand, some have given some justification for it, because some have given an alternative Havana to the Ramah about why we don't duchen every day in Chutz La'aretz, right? So the Ramah says, because Kohanim are not besimcha, which is a shver subjective reason. But others give another reason. Others say that there was a minhag of Kohanim to go to the mikveh before they would duchen. During the week, it was sometimes, depending on the Middle Ages, it was sometimes very difficult to find a pool of water that was nearby, etc. So therefore they discontinued it. Masha'en kein on Yom Tov, since each person was chayiv to go to the mikveh before Yom Tov, you duchened. But on Shabbos, the cheshbon was this. Since Leil Shabbos was a zman of tashmish hamita, so the fear would be that the Kohanim Shabbos morning would be balei keri, would be a bal keri, and the tefillah of Erev Yom Tov wouldn't help them from the tumah they contracted through tashmish hamita, and therefore there was a cheshbon that if they had to be in a state of tahira, it'd be better than for not to duchen. Again, it's very, very shver. I mean, a bal keri is allowed to duchen, but whatever it is, if you connect it to tefillah and tumah, that would be a possible reason. Okay. So why did I digress to all of this? This was all a little bit of an introduction to the Sefer Kol HaTorah. Now, Kol HaTorah was written by Rav Hillel of Shklov, and it's there to give us the teachings of the Vilna Gaon on Bias HaMashiach, on Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, and on the wars of Gog and Magog, and all of these different inyanim. And the Vilna Gaon says, and this is really why I brought this out, I mean, everything else was a digression, is that the Vilna Gaon says that this idea that before Mashiach comes, there have to be wars, there has to be bloodshed, there has to be turbulence, there has to be massive destruction, chavlei leda, the pains of labor, is only one particular scenario. That if necessary, that's what's going to have to happen. But it can be bypassed. by Torah and mitzvahs and maisim tovim, either bypassed legamri or minimized, meaning even if that path even if that path starts, it can be aborted, it can be diverted, it can be rechanneled. So this is a tremendously important message, because it does say that all of the dire prophecies of Gog and Magog, many of which we read on the first day of Sukkot. In fact, the first day of Sukkot actually talks about many bad things happening in Yerushalayim itself. Lo Aleinu, Hashem should save us. And Rav Moshe Sternbach made a big point about that. And I got an email from an Averting who's saying that when his wife saw this email, B'Shem Rav Moshe Sternbach, that somebody wrote, he says, she's terrified, what do I say to, whatever. I mean, he just quoted the Psukim in Zechariah. But the good news is that the Vilna Gaon says, all of these are what we would call worst case scenarios. And everything can be changed. Everything can be diverted. Everything can be turned into a good way. And in fact, the Vilna Gaon even says, even the idea that Mashiach ben Yosef has to be killed is lav dafka. Mashiach ben Yosef can also survive, and the like. So it's important to understand that there are two things the Vilna Gaon, he said many things, but there are two almost contradictory things he said about Gog and Magog, but you need to be aware of both of them. The first thing he said about Gog and Magog, which is very frightening, is that the war of Gog and Magog, when it finally really comes, as opposed to the preliminaries, is only going to last 12 minutes. The war of Gog and Magog is a 12-minute war. For 250 years after the death of the Vilna Gaon, nobody understood what on earth he's talking about. What type of war can only last 12 minutes and then be over? Unfortunately, as Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, as you add knowledge, you add pain. We unfortunately have the understanding exactly of what type of war can be over in 12 minutes. Lo aleinu, a nuclear war, chemical war, whatever it would be. There are wars that essentially can wipe out a lot of the world in 5-10 minutes, whatever it would be. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what I said a moment ago, and that is everything can be changed. Everything can be diverted. Everything can be reformulated. Everything can be reformatted. And therefore, we have great, great opportunities to kind of turn this into bracha. Now again, we've already begun the suffering and it's been very, very severe. But again, the Vilna Gaon is not at all saying once you're on the road, you're stuck. It says even when you're on that bad road, you can get off it. Right? So the fact that wars have started doesn't mean it has to continue until the bitter end. So it's important that when people quote the Vilna Gaon, that they don't just quote like one part of the statement. You need to look at both statements in order to understand it. So on one hand, this does seem connected to Gog and Magog. And by the way, the Gra also has a third thing in which he writes about Russia and the Ukraine as being connected to Gog and Magog. So even before what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, the Gra saw all of the stuff that's going on over there as connected to Gog and Magog. Again, the Ruach HaKodesh is very, very phenomenal here. So there are a lot of signs going on, but it's important to know that we can weigh in, that we do have an impact, that we do have a way of making things better for ourselves, for Am Yisrael, for the world as a whole. And again, having guys come in early and learn Torah early to create a zechus for Am Yisrael is one of the most important, greatest things that we're able to. Again, I mentioned last night, we don't realize what our Torah does simply because we don't see a direct cause and effect. Hashem doesn't let us see those things, so we just don't understand it rationally. But if you're a Maimon, it's 100% true. The Torah that we do brings blessing into the world. And if you say, well, how come so much bad stuff is happening and I'm learning? The answer is, without it, it would be worse. What can I tell you? Meaning, as bad as things are, things could actually be a lot worse. And if they're not, it's at least partially because of the Torah and the mitzvahs that we're learning. So, I know that curtailing Benas Manim is a bit of a sacrifice, but hopefully you'll understand. All of you understand how important it is that you're doing what you are doing. So B'ezras Hashem, it should be a source of Yeshua and Geula. By the way, I got to be careful with Yeshua. I gave. It's amazing what people say. I gave a talk somewhere, and I also said, may it be a source of Yeshua. So it was on YouTube. So somebody made comments. I was listening to this guy, and still he mentions Yeshua. I see now, he's a Christian believer in Yashka. He says, I'm not listening to him anymore. So please believe me. When I say Yeshua, I just mean salvation, redemption, perfectly good word to use. Just like gay used to mean happy, but years ago, right? It doesn't necessarily have any other connotation. So when I say Yeshua, I just mean Geula of Yeshua. I don't mean anything sinister to that particular thing. Okay, so maybe we'll stop here. Anyway, again, be well, and again, may all of our learning, all of our mitzvahs be a zechus for Klal Yisrael.
Thank you for listening to this UMagog production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.